Assalamu alaikum to everybody. Thank you for making time. I'd like to express my gratitude to the Cultural Attaché of the French Embassy, Mr. Dylan, who's, in fact, I would like to request you if you could come and introduce our honored guest.
Thank you, Taimur. Good evening, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. So I'm very pleased to be at Astonis tonight to introduce Dr. Corinne Lefèvre to you. Dr. Lefèvre is a research fellow in early Mughal India at the Center for National Scientific Research in Paris. She's also a member of the Center for the Studies of South Asia in France. She's a scholar of Persian. She taught at the Institute of Asian Languages and Cultures in Paris. She's dedicated almost 20 years of research focusing on Emperor Jahangir, looking at so many different sources on this emperor. She's here for the first time in Lahore, so she will tell you that the first place she went to on Monday was Jahangir's tomb, because to her it was really important. She will talk about that. She's here for a week. Will be speaking at the Lahore Literary Festival as well. She will be presenting a recent book, Consolidating Empire, Elites and, correct me if I'm wrong,
Power and Elites
in Jahangir's India, which she published a few months ago and which is the result of her PhD research of more than 20 years. So I'll leave Corinne to start the talk. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Dylan, for the introduction and for this invitation to come to Lahore, which is really for me the fulfillment of a dream. And thank you very much, Taimur, for having me here and giving me this opportunity to give a talk among this very distinguished majlis. So I'm very pleased. I know that some of you are more knowledgeable than me about the Mughals, others maybe not. So I apologize in advance for those who know more than me, because they are gonna hear things that they know already. But still, I hope that I will be able to tell you a number of things that maybe you had not seen that way, or maybe you didn't know. So my talk today is going to be about Islam and empire in India, and I will look at both the religious ideology and policy of the Mughals, which is, as you know, a very much debated topic. And I will start with a few provocative questions, I would say, such as to what extent may the Mughal Empire be described as an Islamic state? Were the Mughal times a golden age of interreligious harmony between Muslims and Hindus, or on the contrary, a dark age of discrimination and persecution for non-Muslims? And was there such thing as Mughal Islam? And if so, what were the characteristics of Mughal Islam? And so before addressing these very hotly debated questions, I'd like to stress a couple of points that in my mind are worth keeping in mind when you think about these issues. Can I get the next slide, please? So these are very simple remarks. One is the fact that the Mughals were Turco-Mongol, Muslim Turco-Mongols in origin, who could boast of very illustrious ancestors, such as Genghis Khan and Timur, so two very well-known world conquerors. Another salient feature of the dynasty is its gradual transformation, gradual Indianization through a series of matrimonial alliances. And I would like the next slide, please. So here you see some of these matrimonial alliances and the mothers of the successive emperors. And as you may see on these charts, emperors became, from Jahangir's time onward, what we could call mestizos, whose mothers were the daughters or sisters of the many Rajput lords vying for power in Rajasthan. And finally, I'd like to mention two significant statistical elements. One is that a century and a half after Babur's conquest, Muslims remained a minority in an Indic environment. And if you take the well-known Latin phrase cuius regio eius religio, according to which the religion of the ruler was to dictate the religion of those ruled, it was certainly not true for Mughal India. Besides, by the end of the 16th century, 16% of the Mughal rank holders, so the so-called Mansabdars, were Hindus, and their percentage increased twofold during the next century, reaching 32% under Emperor Aurangzeb, who, as you know, has, by way of contrast, a reputation for being very much less favorably inclined towards Hinduism. So these few indicators are enough, I believe, to already answer a number of important questions and to escape fruitless debates. On the one hand, they show that the Mughal Empire and more generally the political domination of Islam over South Asia was not synonymous with massive conversion. On the other hand, they clearly indicate that Muslims, despite being a minority, dominated state administration both at the central and regional levels. In other words, Islam was the religion of a minority who was socially and politically dominant. So, if, as we have just seen, the Mughal state was far from being religiously neutral, does it mean, as Hindu nationalist historians argue today, that the empire founded by Babur was bent on discriminating and persecuting non-Muslims? For the moment, let's suspend our judgment and just note that such an image certainly does not fit well with the Mughal Rajput matrimonial alliances, nor with the incorporation into the state apparatus of non-Muslim elites, as I have just mentioned. Conversely, should we, like other well-known figures like Nehru or the Nobel Prize of Economy Amartya Sen, should we consider the Mughal Empire the architect of Indian secularism and a sort of the promoter of a proto-national unity transcending religious boundaries? However attractive this interpretation may sound to those of us who believe in xenophilia rather than in xenophobia, that is no reason to elude the elements that contradict such an idyllic vision. Under Mughal domination, a number of temples were destroyed, and some non-Muslim religious leaders were jailed or executed. And although these episodes of tension were overall relatively rare and complex events, we'll have an occasion to come back to that, the historian cannot possibly ignore them. So obviously, then, there is no straightforward answer to the question of the relationship between Islam and empire in Mughal times. So what I'm going to do during the rest of my presentation is to show you two of the most important aspects of this relationship, at least in my eyes. First, the major forms of Imperial Islam, that were elaborated and successively or simultaneously practiced by Mughal rulers and their close associates. And then I'm going to use this brief outline of the dynasty's religious ideology as a background, and I will proceed to delineate the different types of interaction that existed between political power on the one hand and the various religious communities and traditions present in the empire. So schematically, there were three major kinds of interactions. One was religious patronage, that is financial support to institutions or individuals. The second I call intellectual curiosity, which generated inter-religious debates as well as the translation into Persian of a wide range of non-Muslim canonical texts. And the third type of interaction was hostility, the principal manifestations of which were, as I have briefly mentioned, temple desecration and the imprisonment or execution of religious leaders. Can I have the next slide, please? So, the first set of questions I want to raise concerns the position of the Mughal pachas or emperors vis-à-vis Islam as a source of spiritual authority. What were the images they sought to publicize in this domain, and what does these images tell us about their preferred Islamic orientations? So humble devotion was the most conventional attitude the Mughals adopted vis-à-vis Islam. And it was also the most widespread across the Islamic world, where since the end of the Abbasid Caliphate in the mid-13th century, temporal leaders had, by and large, been deprived of spiritual authority in favor of ulama and Sufis. So every single Mughal ruler has, during part or the totality of his reign, cultivated an idiom of piety in order to gain, because he believed, of course, but also in order to gain legitimacy in the eyes of the representatives of institutional and mystical Islam. So concerning the former, that is institutional Islam, the ulama and the Sunni orthodoxy, they are generally said to have embodied and to embody. We can, for instance, mention the official use of the Hijri lunar calendar, the mention of the Shahada on the coins produced in the imperial mints, and I have an example to show you, if you could please put on the next slide. So that's a rupee, a silver rupee from Akbar's reign, where the Shahada is clearly mentioned. Another sign of this devotion and respect for the ulema and Sunni orthodoxy in general was the monarch's participation in the public celebrations of major Muslim festivals such as the Eid al-Fitr, and also the imperial sponsorship of the Hajj. And if I could have the next slide. Here you have an illustration of a 17th century pilgrimage guide with a view of Surat, and on the right hand of the painting you may see the ships with the pilgrims embarking in Surat and to cross the Indian Oceans. And last but not least was, of course, the generous patronage by the states of Muslim religious figures and institutions. However, there is no denying that Mughal rulers are far better known for their devotion to Sufi saints than for their adherence to formal Islam. In these, as in other domains, the dynasty engaged in a selective eclecticism, which comes out clearly when one considers the Sufi silsilas that were favored by the successive pachas. As you know, Babur himself was a follower of the Naqshbandiya, a Central Asian brotherhood, which penetrated South Asia in the wake of Mughal armies. And the role of the Naqshbandi shares as dynastic peers continued under Babur's successors Humayun, even though Humayun had also very close relations with the Shattariya, another Sufi order from Central Asia. However, it is the Chishtiya, a very popular brotherhood in South Asia, not least because of the willingness of its followers to adjust to their Indian environment. So that's the Chishtiya that eventually won the competition over the spiritual guardianship of the dynasty. From the 1560s onward, Mughal emperors regularly visited the mausoleum of Muinuddin Chishti in Ajmer, and if we could have the next slide, you'll see a beautiful illustration from the Akbarnama depicting Akbar making a ziyarat to the Dargah of Muinuddin in Ajmer. And so, not only did he visit regularly the shrine, he and his successors also very generously patronized the followers and the shrines of the silsila. And besides Akbar's devotion to another Chishti saint who was named Salim, prompted him to build a new capital on the site of his tomb. And if we could get the next slide. So here you have the Jama Masjid in Fatehpur Sikri near Agra, and in white marble, contrasting with the red sandstone of the masjid, you have the Dargah of Salim Shishti. So not only did Akbar build a capital on the very site of the tomb of Salim, but he also named his first heir the saint, and that is how Salim, the future Jahangir, was born. And this continued for this devotion to the Chishtiya continued for the entire 17th century and beyond. If we could have the next slide, you know that around, so that's Salim Shishti and the Prince Salim in conversation on the margin of a page of Muraka that is preserved in Tehran. And the next slide, please. This is Ruldabad and the tomb of Aurangzeb, who chose to be buried very simply near the grave of another Chishti saint. So, besides, in addition and simultaneously with this position of humble devotion, concurrently, one could say, Mughal emperors also started flirting with sacred kingship since the time of Humayun, notably under the influence of the Safavid Shahs of Iran, who, as you know, began their career as Sufi sheikhs with Shiite leanings before claiming both spiritual and temporal leadership. And so this trend in the Mughal Empire, it was initiated by Humayun, and the development of Mughal sacred kingship reached unprecedented heights during the decades surrounding the first Islamic millennium, that is 1591-92 of the Common Era. And in consonance with the messianic atmosphere of the time, Akbar eventually presented himself as a saint king whom God had chosen to elevate above the ulema, above the Sufis and the monarchs of his time, and to whom God had granted a religious and political authority that was theoretically meant to encompass the whole world. And Akbar's ecumenical spiritual ecumenism, has been most famously epitomized by the motto of 𝐶𝑢𝑙𝑖𝑘𝐶. So this motto has usually been translated as universal conciliation, and pragmatically it translated into the imperial patronage of major Muslim institutions, major religious institutions, both Muslim and Hindus. It also manifested into the organization of interfaith disputations at court and a certain laissez-faire attitude to the plurality of religious practices. In addition, one has to mention the emperor's personal interest in different religious canonical texts, such as the Mahabharata or the Gospels, and also his participation in a number of rituals, such as sun worship or vegetarianism. So, in other words, 𝐶𝑢𝑙𝑖𝑘𝐶 was meant to rally behind the emperor's banner, the subordinates of all persuasions, and it should therefore not be mistaken in my mind with an esprit of tolerance. Every religion had a place in the empire. It was not tolerated, but it was part of the empire, and it has this place as long as the adherents of every religion recognized the monarch as the saint of the age, and as long as they abided by both his temporal and spiritual authority. And this overwhelming importance of the king's figure in the religious ideology elaborated by Akbar, it also translated further into the development of a master-disciple relationship with the elites of the empire. So we know that the initiation into the royal silsila took place on Sundays. The future disciples prostrated themselves before the monarch, and then the novice was awarded a seal upon which was engraved Allahu Akbar, an utterance that was purposefully fraught with ambiguity, since it could be translated both as God is great and as Akbar is God. So under Jahangir, this seal was progressively replaced by miniature portraits of the emperor. If we could have the next slide. So you had versions of on paper. So right now, because this is a PowerPoint, the image seems huge to you, but in reality, it's 5 centimeters in height. So you have versions on papers, and as the next slide will show you, you had also versions of these miniature portraits engraved on gold. And these miniature portraits, if we can get the next slide, they were worn by the disciples of the empire, either as a pendant, and I mentioned this morning. So this is a drawing of Asaf Khan, the stepbrother of Jahangir, the brother of Nur Jahan, who is wearing a miniature portrait of Jahangir. But another way to wear this was on your turban. And as is indicated by you have seen, maybe we can go backward to the previous slide. As you may see, the emperor face is adorned with a nimbus or a halo, which was borrowed, I mean the visual design, the iconography was borrowed from Christian art, but it came to symbolize the spiritual authority of the Pacha. So if we could jump to not the next slide, but the one after that, and you'll see that through the dynasty, until the very end of the dynasty, the Mughal emperors continued to be depicted with this nimbus, and that's the minimal evidence we have of the continuity of their spiritual pretensions. And so there is continuity there. There is likewise the fact that the subordination of the ulema to the monarchs, juridical religious authority, was never questioned by their descendants, even by those who, like Aurangzeb, developed a more conservative vision of Islam, which in his case derived first and foremost from the necessity of distancing himself from the legacy of his father Shah Jahan, against whom he had rebelled in order to seize the crown. Besides, and that is something that I'd like to emphasize in the second part of my presentation, Mughal Sulikul, Mughal universal conciliation, and state pluralism in matters of religious patronage, this never resulted in an equal treatment of all religious groups. As I have said earlier, the dynasty's attitude vis-à-vis these communities ranged from financial support to hostility, and it included intellectual curiosity, one of the key factors presiding over the monarch's choice being the perceived political utility or threat that these groups represented at the regional or pan-Indian level. So now let's move to our first case study. So in addition to the Sufi brotherhoods I have previously mentioned, Krishnaites of the Braj country. Could we move to the next slide, please? So the Braj country, as you probably know, is a region situated near Agra, with Mathura and Vrindavan as its major centers. So the Krishnaites of the region were among the religious groups the Mughals most lavishly supported. Why was this the case, and what kind of support are we talking about? The first point to keep in mind is that the Braj region, where God Krishna supposedly grew up, so this region became from the 16th century onward a major pole of Hindu bhakti or devotion. Besides the Kashwahas, so the first Rajput clan to have concluded matrimonial alliances with the dynasty. So this Kashwaha became actively involved in the Braj Renaissance from the 16th century onward. And if we could move to the next slide, it's for instance to the patronage of Raja Man Singh, so the stepfather, the father-in-law, of Jahangir. It is to his patronage that the construction of the Govindev temple of Vrindavan is usually attributed. And last but not least, we have preserved a whole series of imperial farmans or edicts that allocate the revenue of tax-free lands to the temples of Mathura and the neighboring area. And these collections of documents, it stretches from Akbar's to Shah Jahan's times. And if we are to believe the earliest documents, the earliest farmhands, the Kashwahas played, at least initially, a crucial role in the attribution of land grants to these Krishnite institutions. To sum up, then, Braj temples attracted Mughal patronage due to a combination of factors. One was their geographical proximity to the heart of the empire. The second was their religious popularity in North India. And third were their strong connections with the Rajput allies of the dynasty, whether these allies were Kashwahas, as had been the case initially, or later on during Jahangir's reign, the Bundelas of central India. So the political dimension of the Mughals' patronage of Braj Temple is all the more important to keep in mind in order to understand the episodes of contained or open conflict that punctuated the relationship between the dynasty and the Krishnite center. As you probably know, one such episode occurred in 1669, when Aurangzeb ordered the destruction of the 𝐾𝐻𝐵𝐻, temple that had been built by a Rajput from Orcha, the famous Birsingh Bundela. But at that time, the Bundela clan had raised the standard of rebellion against Emperor Aurangzeb. So in this, as in the majority of cases, active in the royal domains. And the case I have chosen is that of Catholicism in Akbar's and Jahangir's court. It's true that this is
generally the modern Hindutva historians, they are generally viewing them as the foreigners, that they came from there and they remained the foreigners. Secondly, the majority and minority concept, that the Muslims were in minority in the, if we calculate it, they were not more than 20-25%, and still the ruling elite, generally they consisted of the Muslims. So the dynasty, not only the royalty, but also the mansabdars, even if their numbers were large or they were incorporated in that imperial system.
The land of kings, and there are a lot more local people that Muslims are. And how can you say that Mughals, or I mean families of Muslims that have converted or migrated in South Asia for several hundred years are today considered as foreigners? That's impossible for me. So that was your first question. The second one is that, I mean, of course, the common people who happens to be from a different religion from the rulers had no share in the sovereignty. But give me an example in the medieval and early modern world where people had the power. I wouldn't be able to provide you one. So that's the way political sovereignty worked in that time period. You had dynasty ruling over countries that are today nations, regions that were ruled by, most of the dynasts, the UK, the dynasty was from German origin at some point. So it was a very common feature of political life across Eurasia during this period. So there is nothing specific for me in the case of what happened in Hind. Raising a very important point is that we know very little about the common people, because the common people did not read or write, more importantly. And as you know, and as you have seen through my presentation, what I have and what we have as historians of this period working on Persian sources is the perspective of the elite. But from what the records, the texts we have, as I said, there were episodes of tensions, but if you take the scale, the time scale of the chronology of the Mughal domination, they appear to have been relatively rare, and there were also, as there are today, sites of common shared devotion between Muslims and Hindus, and also Sikhism was also a form of, I don't like the word syncretism, but we know that they took elements from Hinduism and Islam. So I think that the spiritual frontiers were much more porous at that time than they have become later on, especially under the influence of the British colonization. But I mean, so just to follow up on your first question before and trying to answer or ignore the question, your second question. I've not decided yet. I'm just remembering a passage from the Akbarnama, so the major chronicle of Akbar's reign. No, not of the Akbarnama, of the 𝐈𝐬𝐥𝐚𝐦, where Abul Fazl, the author, describes, mentions the Buddhas of Bamiyan. But he says that there were three great idols, that there was the father, the mother, and a child, but it does not connect them at all with Buddhism. And actually does not pay great attention to them. I don't know if he had ever been there, because you had this intelligence officer who wrote reports about whatever happened or anything special they saw in the provinces. So maybe he wrote his account of the Bamiyan Buddhas following these reports, and did not go himself, but yeah, so that was just something that came to my mind. But if I understood your second question rightly, your question is about caste in Islam in South Asia.
I don't know if it's Islam. So we spoke about Islam.
Muslim society, I think that we can all agree.
Still there.
Yeah. So, there is this very classical idea that Islam was at the start a very egalitarian tradition, and that it could not accommodate a system like the caste system, but it has been demonstrated by a number of historians and also anthropologists, yes, that Islam, first of all, had a very strong hierarchy. You have the notion of Ashraf and the Sayyids, who form a higher group within the believers in the Prophet. And anthropological studies have also shown that the religious, the Muslim populations, Muslim society within South Asia has very much absorbed the caste system. And I have colleagues working on what they straightforwardly call Muslim castes.
That's right.
That's quite natural, especially for Islam. Wherever it goes, it sort of absorbs, because the religion allows that. Fiqh allows that, which is the common practice. That's why Islam has gone to all over, wherever it's gone, it's been acclimatized. We look at it through the 19th century puritanical view, which we've inherited, so there are problems with that, I think.
Two questions I have. First is that generally the colonial historiography has constructed the image of Jahangir as a person who is generally indulging in pleasures, and he has no administrative skills, and he is not a good ruler. How much the discovery of Abul Qasim's Lahori's Majalis Jahangir has changed, has transformed that image? Second question that you have mentioned, that Jesuits' accounts, they refer to that we are not able to convert the people because these people are polygamous. They marry more than one wife, and because Christianity believes in monogamy, so that is the reason that one of the major hurdle in converting the Muslims to Christianity is their love for marriages and that kind of a construction. But at the same time, they generally write that Hindus are more amenable, they are more easy to be converted to Christianity, while Hindus were also polygamous. So how that contradiction is there?
Jahangir added to wine, opium, the slave of his carnal passion, as I argue in my book, it has its sources in both European accounts and also Shahjahani historiography, but I won't linger on that now. The addictions of Jahangir are not mentioned in the Majalis Jahangiri, whereas in the memoirs he speaks very openly of how many glasses of arak I have drank today.
14 glasses.
Too much, too many. That's for sure. But that he was drinking and eating bang and having opium, that's a fact. But who didn't? I mean, Babur did the same. Many of the rulers were the same, and it was, as you know, also a way to ecstasy of communion with the divine. So it's ambivalent. But the Majalis Jahangiri, in my eyes, they have been it's an extraordinary text. First, because you get the Mughal perspective on these Christian Mughal debates, and also because it really highlights the fact that Jahangir continued to present himself as a saint king, as a Mujaddid, just like Akbar. And before the Majalis Jahangiri were discovered, all you had to go by concerning his spiritual claims were the paintings, because in the paintings with the nimbus, the famous one with Jahangir preferring a 𝐴𝑢𝑡ℎ𝑜𝑟𝑒 to the kings of this world. So this was obvious in the paintings, but you had no real massive written evidence of these claims. But in the Majalis Jahangiri, it's obvious, and there is a series of dreams that Jahangir makes and narrates, and which all claim one and the same thing, that he's in direct communication with God. So that was your first question, and your second question was about... Actually, there is one, it's not a major topic of discussion in the Majalis Jahangiri, but still, when the subject of polygamy comes to be debated, Abdul Sattar, who wants to, be appreciated by Jahangir, says something in favor of polygamy and speaks about the Hindu gods and the hundreds of wives they had. So it's not the Mahabharata, but it's still at a higher level, and the hundreds of children of the Hindu gods.